we're just going to be here to educate as much as we can about what we're doing out at the range, what kind of activities going on, what our airspace looks like that we manage, and how we can maybe get better at conveying some of the activities that we have going on out there and avoid people. Really, the whole reason we're here is to prevent people from scraping paint, so we don't have to call those guys out to pull somebody out of a ejection seat or worse, a pilot airplane. So rules of engagement, it's real informal. I'm here for you guys, so interrupt me at any time if you got a question, comment, concern, gripe, complaint. This is not about us. We're not trying to sell anything. This is us trying to better educate you all on what we're doing, and then you educating us on what your needs are and concerns are. Like I said, questions are encouraged. If I throw any fancy acronyms out there, I apologize. It's the kind of the lingo of the military. Stop me and tell me what is that, and I'll apologize and then tell you what it is, because I tried scrubbing it, but things always sneak in there, so definitely call me on that. Like I said, I'm not here to show anybody how smart I am or not smart I am, which is probably the latter. All right, so what I'm going to cover, a couple topics. We're going to cover just some of the aircraft that fly out there, some pictures. I got a couple cool videos for y'all to watch. Hopefully we can hear it, but at least you'll be able to see it. Again, can everybody see this okay so far? Okay. We'll kind of cover what some of the ground folks are doing. Most of you may have heard we're going to be busy this next week with an exercise. Get in that a little bit. And then, of course, our airspace and how we manage it and use it. Follow up with any questions y'all have. And then if anybody wants to hang around, we're working on some airspace changes. I'd be happy to explain it to you. Otherwise, I'm done talking. You guys can ask me questions. All right. Our goal really is to train the whole unit. That means joint training is our big push. We're trying to get the Army and the Navy and the Air Force to integrate, in the Marine Corps, of course, all as one as much as possible out here. You know, with the airport where it is, Fort Riley, and the size of the range and the airspace really lends itself to this joint training thing that the military's been trying to get going for 20 years. And some of our leadership's had some really good vision on that, and we're starting to see the fruits of that labor, especially next week, with all that coming together. So we're really harmonizing that joint training concept, and that's why we exist. We're a support asset. We don't fly out here personally. We still wear flight suits because we did fly. We're both B-52 weapons systems officers. We're not even pilots. But we're here to facilitate these guys' training along with a bunch of other people that work out there. I'll show you guys a quick video. It's what the setup is, and I don't know if you're gonna be able to hear it, but you're gonna hear some bullets zinging if you can hear them. It's the guys shooting at some bad guys, and you're gonna hear some bullets hitting the armor that they're hiding behind. And then you're gonna see what the air power can bring for these guys, and this is kind of what we're training the guys to do out at the range. They're shooting a Maverick missile, is what you're going to see here. So long, bad guy. Pretty good example of close air support. Close air support being a lot of what we do out there. These guys come in from all over the country, get on the ground, and then start talking to the Air Force guys. Or whatever assets up there, and get that kind of firepower that they need. So just kind of a little bitty snippet. I'm not going to sit here and bore you guys to death about what we do out there, but that's a big chunk of what we're doing. All right, our mission, primarily we're Air National Guard, so we're state guardsmen, but we're full-time. Our job is to support the Air National Guard aircraft. I realize that's small, probably a little bit small for the back there to read, but F-16 assets that we have are Sioux Falls, Iowa, Tulsa, Oklahoma. We get a few from Colorado out there in Denver at Buckley Air Force Base, and then Des Moines, Iowa, which is going away. C-130s from St. Joe, Missouri, our Air National Guard, and then actually the B-2 guys have, there's actually Air National Guardsmen flying those, and Missouri Guards flying those. And then secondary is to support the ground personnel. We have our own Air Support Operations Squadron. You think if you've seen, I had a clip, but we're not going to be able to hear it. We Were Soldiers, if you've seen that, where they're calling airstrikes in. It's what those guys do. It's kind of what I was explaining and what those guys are doing in that video. We also support active duty aircract from all around the country, and I've probably left some off here, but B-1s, B-2s, B-52s, F-16s, F-A-18s, A-10s are a regular user, but they're Air Force Reserve over in Missouri. C-130, C-5, AC-130, that'll be the first time this next week. E-3, which is AWACS, airborne radar, and then plenty of rotor wing. And then fourth objective, support the active duty ground training. We don't see a whole lot of it, but there is some. And then finally, support the civilian aircraft and UAV development, especially K-State and some private entities there. All right, who we are.
You're going to have an AC-130 out here next week?
Yep, he'll be parked on the ramp, but he'll be flying and shooting. AC-130 H model. Okay, we are, we're 26 Air National Guard, full-time Guard, and then we got 5 state employees. So not too many of us, and then the 284th, the Air Support Operations Squadron, has about 80 folks, only about 13 of which are full-time. We're both attached to McConnell Air Force Base. There's a Guard unit down there. The 184th Intelligence Wing is who supports us. Okay, there's basically, there's Salina. There's the units that fly from Colorado, South Dakota, North Dakota, South Dakota again, Iowa, Missouri, although Iowa's going away. Fort Smith, Arkansas, going away, used to fly us. Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, Louisiana, Texas, and then I put on here just a little more background. These are active duty ranges. This is Utah Test and Training Range out by Salt Lake City and Melrose Range down in New Mexico. These units have been curtailed somewhat because of sequestration. The Guard hasn't been, so we're actually seeing an increase, believe it or not, especially the bomber aircraft. Only reason I put those on there. And you can kind of tell we're centrally located to a range where you can get, you've got a big runway here. We've got capability to drop weapons and also some other assets that are unique to us. I'm going to skip this slide because it's in red and I shouldn't have put it in red, but it just has the mileage to the users that we fly. Anywhere from about 600 miles to as close as 150 is how far they're flying in from. All right, I'm wanting to run everybody through. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but I wasn't sure who all knew what about what flies out there, so we're going to go run through some slides and some pictures of some aircraft. Hopefully they show up here. And if you think you know the answer, raise your hand or just shout it out. It's fine. B1, correct. Quick stats on him. These guys are pretty frequent users. They're a low level and they're all weather. They have a radar that's real good. It picks up antennas and terrain, and actually the jet flies itself around that terrain. They don't hand fly it, so it can get down the weeds. Talking 500 feet AGL to 2,000 feet AGL is where they like to drop low level, and then up in the mid 20,000s they'll drop. So they're in between there somewhat, but for the most part 500 down low or up high. In both cases they're doing about 600 knots, so definitely something to keep in mind if you're flying north of the range and you see one of these guys flying around. They won't see you. As you can tell, when he's going fast, it's going to be tough to pick up any see and avoid. Like I said, terrain following radar, which it basically just avoids the terrain. He's a 500,000 pounds at max weight, and they're carrying about, just to give you some idea, one of the loadouts is 24 2,000-pound bombs. So they bring a lot. B2, yep. B2, it's again all weather, low observable, which means it's stealth. Everybody's probably heard that term. They're about 400 knots, and they actually are a low show here as well. Typically about 25 to 3,500 AGL, and then they'll come over here in the 40,000 range too. So obviously up in Class A airspace, not much of a collision factor there, but down at 2,500 certainly could be a player. And they're real skinny, so they're hard to see head on, even in the daylight. They're about 350,000 pounds max weight, and they carry about 8,500 pounds of bombs. And they're probably here weekly as well, I would say. B-52. Again, high and low altitude, mostly, I got that backwards. He's mostly high altitude these days. They are TA capable. About 450 knots, they can get down to 1,000 feet AGL. We had one on yesterday, 3,500, he got below the weather. In fact, he did an ILS approach, got below the weather, then flew in the range and dropped bombs. So we will see them down low. They're a little slower and a little easier to see with the smoke trail and everything, but definitely a player down low. 500,000 pounds, they carry about 45 to 500 pound bombs. Okay, heard it, F-16. Frequent user. All-weather, all-purpose fighter, 600 knots. They're down in the weeds at 500 AGL. 25,000 pounds and mixed armament. The thing to note about these guys is the bombers are generally level for the most part. F-16s will be all over the place, anywhere from 500 to, they'll come run in, they'll pop to 5,000 feet and drop. They'll come in, they'll do dives. So really unpredictable, and they're hard to see.
18.
Correct. F-18, don't see a whole lot, except when the Canadians are around. We're supposed to have some here next week that didn't show. Again, all-weather purpose, pretty much like an F-16, except he weighs a little bit more and has a different armament. There's more to it than that, of course, but big picture, it's the same profile as F-16, up and down, from down low in the weeds to quite high. You've seen plenty of these, yep. Warthog, A-10, Lightning Bolt, or what is it, Thunderbolt? I can't remember what the official name is. Warthogs, close enough. They are VFR. I mean, they've got ILS equipment, but they don't have radars. They need to be visual with whatever they're hitting weapons-wise. 400 knots on a really good day, maybe with tailwind. He's slow. And a little bit easier to see, but the Air Force didn't nail that paint scheme on it, so they're not exactly highlighted out there. They're really down in the weeds. 100 feet AGL, you're starting to get in a crop duster collision area there. Up to mid-20s again on a good day. Pretty heavy, 50,000 pounds. Pretty maneuverable still though, and very maneuverable with a big gun there on the front, obviously. They're here every Wednesday and then some more frequently sometimes, depending on what's going on, like next week.
C-130.
Yep, C-130. 4 engines, all-weather transport, don't see them a whole lot. They do get down in the weeds. They're fairly slow. I forgot the speeds, but you're looking at probably 350 knots again on a good day, about like a King Air. I don't know, what's a King Air? 300 knots maybe, 250? He's probably 300. I just pull that out. 150,000 pounds. They do have an AC-130 version, and there will be one here next week. They'll be up a little bit higher, but these guys definitely come in down low. And they do a few cargo drops here as well. It's been a while. I heard it, C5. We have these guys showing up as well, why I wanted to add this on here. They're coming from Texas to do some training with our threats that we can emit for them, as well as the rockets we shoot at them. About 450 knots, not real fast, but when they're here, they are down low, and it's hard to miss them because it's an 800,000 pound airplane. So you'll see them lumbering out there. It's pretty cool to watch. But know they're around, and of course they get up high as well. No munitions that I'm aware of.
Blackhawk.
Yeah. You guys got these out here. I'm sure you've seen them zorting around. I probably don't need to brief it, but you know, obviously 0 to about 150, I think might be pushing it. 0 feet to 10,000 is what they advertise, and they're on range quite a bit. They also have ordnance that we do door gunnery out there. And there's one that carries a 30 mil gun, believe it or not. Okay, that's it for aircraft. Ground personnel, like I said, lots of JTACs. That's a Joint Terminal Air TAC Controller. They're the guys working with the aircraft that are on the ground. Or, I'm sorry, the aircraft flying in to support the ground troops. Integrate air power with ground forces and artillery. They're embedded with Army units, but they are Air Force. Like I said, think forward air controller like in the movie We Were Soldiers. If you've seen it, I had a clip. I don't think it's going to work, but you can go on YouTube and see it, and it's a pretty good movie. That's kind of what they look like. They run about 20 knots. On a really good day, yeah. We do see some ground Army maneuver, but limited in scope. We try and keep that joint only. It's an Air Force range. We try and keep it joint or Air Force exclusively. And then civil authorities, Kansas Highway Patrol is out doing some EOD blows. We usually try and get the airspace active 5,000 feet and down for that kind of thing. Law enforcement, and then like I mentioned earlier, K-State comes out with their UAVs. It's been a while. I'm surprised Kirk isn't here. But anyhow. Okay, that pretty much covers our users. I'm going to get into some airspace definitions. Again, not trying to insult anybody's intelligence, so we'll kind of gloss over this. If you get any questions, though, there's no dumb questions. But
do you have any Apaches for Fort Riley over here?
Very rarely, maybe once a year, every other year. Good question.
You guys aren't going to have any kind of artillery assets in play during this exercise here, are you?
Actually, we are.
Okay.
Yep. The airspace will be active. They'll be within R3601. We're at 155 millimeter Howards, Paladins. They'll be shooting up to about 7,000 feet, so pretty low for those guys. Good question. Any more questions before I go on past users? Okay. Military operating area. The FAA defines that as the airspace established outside Class A airspace to separate or segregate certain non-hazardous military activities from IFR traffic and to identify VFR traffic where these activities are conducted. Well, what the hell does that mean? Let's decode that real quick. My definition. Really, what this means to us is VFR traffic can certainly transit a military operating area, a MOA, we call it, but can be unwise. Kind of touchy. I know folks, it's tough when we've activated airspace for long periods of time and you need to get through there. Obviously, you're perfectly in your right to do it. One of the reasons we're here today is to maybe, we're not trying to stop you from doing that. We just want to maybe educate you on what's out there, what the threats are, and what we can do to help mitigate that. So certainly you can be in those military operating areas. I'll show you a picture of what they look like around for the stuff that we manage, and maybe some ways to avoid a potential hazard. IFR gets vectored around the area by Kansas City Center. And then Smoky Hill, we actually activate that airspace. So Bison, Smoky Hill, Mo, and R3601 is activated by us. Real time with Kansas City Center, anywhere from 500 feet AGL, except for the restricted area, it's down the surface, up to 230 and above, but that gets into some different rules. However, we only try and activate that when we necessarily or absolutely need it. So when it's practical, we try and break that into smaller chunks so you guys can get through unimpeded. All right, restricted area book definition. I'm not going to read it to you. You guys probably know what it is. Basically, it means there's some dangerous things going on in there. So my definition, it's prohibitive in nature. I think the FAA says penetration of restricted areas without authorization from using or controlling agency may be extremely hazardous to the aircraft and its occupants. I'll tell you, it is hazardous to aircraft and its occupants. It's one of our smaller airspaces, but it's definitely the most dangerous. Prohibitive in nature, but not a prohibited area. What's going on in there are aircraft climbing, descending quickly, weapons fall into the air, and then lasers that can cause permanent eye damage. And that all happens within restricted area 3601. It is a small part of our airspace, but a very bad idea to be in it when it's active. That being said, I would say way less than half the time we're here on Earth, it's not active. In fact, we had a biplane out about a year ago doing strafe runs on the strafe pits. It was pretty cool to watch. You know, you guys are welcome to come out. People come out and look at the targets. It's a lot of fun to watch general aviation come out and do that. Have at it. Just don't hit the ground. Okay, here's what our airspace looks on a sectional. I'm guessing you guys are all too familiar. This is a little dated. I apologize. I was trying to get the download of the most current version. I had a hard time, but here's Salina, and here's restricted R3601, Canopus Lake. This is a Smoky MOA here. That's down to 500 feet AGL, and Bison MOA out here down to 1,000 AGL. Great Bend Airport, Ellsworth Airport. There's our airspace with some pretty drawings I made and just definitions. We'll get to this airspace in a minute because that's probably really the meat of why I need to be here explaining this to you. That one gets a little confusing. I just put some pointers on there in case you couldn't see where things are, Ellsworth, Great Bend, and Russell. Typically, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and then sometimes Tuesday through Thursday, 8 to midnight are our typical hours. Obviously, that changes. It definitely doesn't mean it's active all day. We activate and deactivate on a timely basis, so we're not hogging the airspace. You know, it's the National Airspace System. It's your airspace. We just borrow it for certain chunks of time, of the day. In fact, the guys out at Smoky, the guys that work at operations are real good about activating and deactivating the airspaces on a very timely manner so that we're not just leaving it active because it's convenient. We want to give that back and try and work with Center and all the local flyers like you all so that you can use that airspace and not just us. All right, I'm going to jump into what we call the north and south racetracks. Are there any questions on our airspace in general right now? How we activate it or the size? We can go back slides if we need to.
Is it just a simple phone call to Kansas City Center and saying, hey, we're going active from whole thing or from this block to this block? For the most part, yeah. We the day before we go into a scheduling program called MADE. Y'all may have dealt with it, may not have. It interfaces with Kansas City Center. They put in and we say, here's the times we want tomorrow, and then they put a NOTAM out for that. Then the next day, exactly. We have a red phone. We call it a shout phone. It's a hotline, just like in the movies. And we go, hey, we'd like to activate, yada, yada, yada. And they usually wait a few minutes, and then they'll activate it for us. Good question. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Does anybody know what an IR route and instrument route is? Anybody familiar? Doug is. Well, I'll explain that real quick. An instrument route is just a low-level route for military aircraft to fly. It's published, and then when it's activated, it's NOTAMed out. We have an IR route that goes through the range and then pokes out the north and pokes out the south. Why that's there, I'll explain here in a second. And it's important that you know, if you look on your sectional, you'll see it. It's probably labeled something different. This one's labeled IR 504. It probably shouldn't be anymore. It probably says 513 or 526. Same difference. But it's a little gray line here coming out of the restricted airspace. A background on those, they were designed for the B-1s. A B-1 doing 600 knots at 500 feet, you could probably, you're all flyers, you can do the math. He's dropping his bombs about here. He can't make that turn and stay in the airspace. So what Kansas City Center and the Kansas Air National Guard decided to do was build this IR route so that it goes around, and it would cause them, if they flew the route itself, they were in protected airspace once they left the restricted airspace to turn to the north. Oops, sorry. So it was designed for the B-1s. We've carried it over to the bombers nowadays and the heavies. It's the only way they can use this range is that I'm going to call it an airspace for now, to the north of the restricted airspace. We have an LOA with Kansas City Center, and it's basically what I just explained. We use that IR route to, I don't want to say cheat, but get aircraft north of the restricted airspace so that they can make that off-target turn and not violate airspace. We're only allowed to use it for heavies. Fighters can't use it. And I already explained that. Okay, here's what the military aviators see, and we can get this, maybe in that pamphlet. Is it? I don't know if they are. I think it is. There's some pamphlets over here if you guys want to take a depiction of our airspace. You can take them with you, and we'll get you all the data you guys need. But this is basically, that IR racetrack has a 3 nautical mile corridor either side of a center line. And what that winds up looking like is this. So although it's not an airspace per se like a MOA, it is protected and it's NOTAM 24/7. We're working on fixing that because that to me is a foul on our part. It means you can fly through it, but you don't know when it's active, and that doesn't do you all any good. So we're trying to fix that. For now, it's NOTAM all the time to protect that airspace, but know that that exists there, and occasionally planes are on it down low. I'm sorry, I didn't mention this. The floor of that airspace to the north is 3,200 MSL, so they shouldn't be below 3,200 MSL to the north. And to the south, it's 3,000 MSL. We do see airplanes transit this fairly often. All right, that covers airspace. Anybody have any questions on that IRI? I know that's confusing. It is to us sometimes. Okay. I kind of touched on it a minute ago. Squawks, transponders, very helpful. We have a radar feed out at Smoky Hill called not TARDIS, but RADS. Thank you. We get a feed from Hutchinson, and we're trying to get the ASR from Fort Riley. It's fairly real time. There's a bit of a delay, maybe 2-3 seconds. So if you're squawking 1200, we know you're out there. Doesn't mean we always see you because we're not controllers. Nobody's air traffic control out there. We're range control officers are about as close as we get. So we can advise the military aircraft when a VFR squawks nearby, but we can't vector anybody. I mean, we can advise them to vector around that. If we happen to catch it on the radar feed, a lot of times we won't see that. But again, extremely helpful if y'all are squawking, especially if you're going to be anywhere near the airspace. Like I said, this isn't a catch-all. Best advice is to avoid the airspace when it's active. Some more tips, fly IFR when possible, and participate in radar flight following. Kansas City knows when we're active and they can vector you around. Completely understand the VFR, and you got to do it, you got to do it. Being predictable if you are VFR is also real helpful. If we see out there and we know you're on a 050, I can tell that B1 is doing 600 knots. I've got VFR traffic, he's in Smoky MOA, he's 080, he's 5 miles from you, and this is his speed. And they can kind of work around you that way. If you're turning or climbing a lot, it gets a lot more difficult to predict what you're doing, obviously, because you're not predictable. And then just good practice to see and avoid, and avoiding complacency. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know here. Just good aviation, airmanship. What we can do to help. There's probably a lot more than this. This is stuff I just came up with real quick. I put this brief together on the fly. We've been pretty busy. I know I left some things out here, and we'll get to questions here in a minute. We've obviously got some NOTAM issues with that IR racetrack. We're working it. Bear with us, and we're eventually trying to turn that into a legitimate airspace that we can deactivate and activate real time. Real-time activation notification. I don't know what we can do here other than what Salina's already doing, which is a huge help, I think. I don't know. Do y'all listen to the ATIS and listen for when we're active? Okay, good. We're trying. We also have a shout line, and I didn't mention this, that goes over to the tower here, and they broadcast that on ATIS for us real time as much as possible. Let's see here. I want to get in that. Okay. I'll just show you guys real quick too. This is Salina here. This is our 3601 right here. Just to give you guys some idea of why we're so hell-bent on being in this little chunk of airspace. To drop a weapon or blast a laser, you got to be in restricted airspace. Somebody had I wish they wouldn't have done it this way, but it's what we've got. When the property was bought, they stood up the airspace right above it. Well, this yellow line, which I know is hard to see, goes right to the eastern and sandwiches the north border of R3601. That aqua-colored box or shape is our impact area. As you can see, we're only a couple miles from the north border restricted area 3601 and to the east here. So we're really working in a corner, and the guys, they're doing 600 knots and weigh 500,000 pounds. They just can't make that turn, and it's hard for an F-16, frankly. So you can see that we're hemmed in a corner here. we're touching those borders when we're up there for sure. And then of course the bombers are spilling to the north on that IR racetrack. Just wanted you folks have an idea of why we're so concentrated over here towards Salina. Not ideal, but it's the way it goes. That's just another slide for airspace. All right, that's it for me. That's all the presentation I have. I've got a video if you guys want to stick around and watch it. It's maybe a 30-second clip of some bombs falling, and then we're working on, like I said, developing that north area and south area into legitimate military operating areas. I have a brief on that. If you care to look, you can stick around and we can talk about that. Otherwise, what I really want to do is open up the questions and concerns, gripes from you all about what we can do better and help facilitate a relationship here. And we're going to take notes, and I think you all signed in and we've got emails so we can get information back out to you if you got things we need to follow up with. So with that, unless there's something I'm missing, open up the floor for questions, or you guys can throw daggers at me. I'll be your whipping boy until you're ready to go. Yes, sir.
It's not about Smoky Hill. I mean, I operate at a Clay Center, that's Fort Riley like that. But the question is, Air Force policy. When you're transitioning in, shouldn't you call the local airport announcing that you're going to be flying over their airspace?
Let's see.
I know the Army guys do, because I hear the Blackhawks, they come in, they say, yeah, we're going to operate in your area. But I got a pair of C-130s that come in. That I've had close calls a couple times.
Are they inside a restricted airspace or a special use airspace?
No. About 500 feet right at the threshold of the runway.
They should be, I would think. Gosh, I can't imagine them not saying that they're stating their intentions. Is this over Manhattan Airport or Clay Center?
Clay Center.
Okay. Is that a controlled airfield? No, I guess it's probably not.
Uncontrolled.
They should be.
Okay.
I wish I could tell you who that is. I can give you a pretty educated guess, and maybe I could get a hold of them. I don't suppose you had any tail numbers on you.
I got one close. I can tell you crew chief's name.
And then that's habitually happening?
It hasn't happened for a while.
Okay.
But every once in a while, you got a pair of C-130s. I mean, they follow that river.
Okay,
Right
yeah.
down that-
20 bucks, that's probably the St. Joe guys. We'll call them,
Okay.
and we'll talk to them about it. Sure, we'll take that.
This is a courtesy call saying, yeah, we're low altitude operating your area, because there's a lot of spray planes. And
I think they should know better off the top of my head without getting in the regs and books on that. We'll call. We got a working relationship with that unit. We'll call them and see if something they can do. Yes, sir.
There's a VR route from St. Joe over to the range, and we see them come across there all the time. I'll bet you that's who they are.
And that's a good point. They could be on a VFR route, and if that's the case, then I don't know that they have to. I think that should be, but it should be. I think VR routes are NOTAM, but again, don't quote me. We'll try and get you an answer on that.
Okay.
What was your name?
Darren Carls.
Is your email on the?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'll put it down.
Well, when we get done, we'll get your contact info, so we'll get you some info on that for sure. Good question.
You had mentioned that your radar picks up VFR squawk codes, but at K-State we have our own for, just for specific aircraft. Can you pick up all of them, or just?
Yeah, it gets from the Hutch feed. It gets all squawks. Yeah. So if you're squawk, I should have probably clarified. That's a good question. We do see everything, and we can filter it by altitude, but we obviously keep the low sector an eye on that. Yeah.
I guess it would depend on if they're doing low altitude or high altitude drops, but especially on that north racetrack, they're above 3,200 MSL. What's the max altitude we could see them on that racetrack?
Well, if they could be up to 23,000 if they're dropping weapons. Okay. Now they'll be dropping that inside the restricted airspace, of course, but really you could see them up to whatever center gives them, which well into the 40s. Yes, sir.
B-52s doing any low altitude runs now? Like they used to do?
Very little. There's one squadron left. The 49th Test Squadron out of Barksdale are still qualified to do so, and they do low level. Although yesterday we had guys in there at 3,500, but nothing super low, except for that one squadron. Maybe once a month they come in and do that.
I know up there around my airport, some officers came by one day and told us that they were going to be flying. they flew across from, say, Natoma to Beloit area and had a bomb sensor where they could electronically bomb a site, I understand, you know, they're south of Beloit, about 6-8 miles, where they had it set up.
Sure, yeah.
I would sit on my runway and all and see them go by off the
Yeah.
runway, but I was always watching for them.
Yeah, they just did away with those electronic scoring sites.
Yeah, I just wondered if they were back doing low altitude runs. I hadn't seen them in a long time.
Yeah, very little, unfortunately. Or fortunately.
You said they were flying anymore.
Yeah, they're supposed to be flying till 2040, so you should be seeing them for a while yet.
Okay.
90-year-old airplanes. Good question. What else? You guys are an easy crowd. I expected more than this. More questions.
Is it possible at all for civilians to somehow, on the ground, go into R3601 to see some airplanes flying around?
We used to try and have an open house. We were trying to do it this year, and then sequestration hit, so we could get you guys over there. But you know, we don't advertise it. Get with me afterwards. We can talk about get the locals over there for sure. Sir?
I forgot what I was going to ask. I have oftentimes, you know, called Salina-area and got permission to cross on a Sunday, and they're not active, or holiday, and there's nobody out there. And I've got permission to fly across there several times. But is that still an active way to work? I mean, he said something about Kansas City Center. I talked to him.
That's a real good point, a real good question. I'm glad you asked that. Absolutely. Like I said earlier, this airspace is your airspace, not ours. We borrow it. And as I mentioned earlier, we're active far less, or I'm sorry, we're active far less than we're actually active. So I think the tower will advise you. Will you guys answer that?
Yeah, we get questions and we just advise the pilot, the information that we have is that it's not active or it is active.
Okay.
Beyond that, we don't, that's all we do. We don't give anybody permission to go through there. We just tell them it's active or inactive.
Okay. And the NOTAMs should be very up to date, real time. The day prior we get those NOTAMs issued. If there's a better way, I'm open all ears to get the word out when we're not active. You know, the NOTAM being the catch-all, but you know, this day and age with computers, there may be a way. I don't have the best idea on how that could work yet. You know, feel free to shoot us emails or let us know, or whoever up channel that kind of thing. That hey, here's an idea on how you guys can let me know that I can avoid traffic in that area. But yes, sir, you're correct for the most part. Kansas City Center will advise you as well. I'm pretty certain.
Well, I've even had clearance going across Fort Riley too during like Thanksgiving and Christmas time. You can get clearance to go through there.
Right. I know they're active quite a bit more than we are, but I can't speak to that too much.
I just wondered if that was still a policy that you could do. You know,
Yep.
if you felt it was
Yeah, just call Manhattan Tower.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
And they're late, you know, if it's active or not.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. Fly through there anytime we're not active. And typically on weekends, it's not active. Anybody else? Good questions. We'll be back. We're not. This isn't a one-time and out thing. We'll try and get to these meetings you all have as often as we can do it. Which really I don't see why we can't with three of us over there. We can get over and address any concerns y'all have. Melissa McCoy in the back. Appreciate you setting this up. She worked with us to get some radio spots and get the word out, and we're getting it filmed obviously. So hopefully we can get the word out and get everybody. We haven't had too many close calls. Every now and then it gets kind of iffy, and we want to make sure that everybody knows what we got going on over there. Anybody else?
I'm sorry, I'm talking all the time. But I got the opportunity back in the 60s to be on the tower out there at the bomb range. And if you guys have never been out there, it was quite an experience. We took us up on the tower there, and those jets would when they turn to head towards the target, that target's only out there about 40 feet from you. When they start shooting, and you're just hoping, don't shoot here. You know? But that was quite an experience for us.
Yeah, it could get pretty sporty.
To get out there.
I would really encourage everybody to come out. Hopefully we have an open house next year. It really doesn't cost us anything, so it's unfortunate they had to turn off the open house, but perception's everything, and we just didn't think it was the best idea with the Air Force telling us that no more air shows or open houses for money reasons, even though, again, these guys get a training sortie out of it when they come here, whether there's 3,000 people watching or 5 of us. So I think, knock on wood, don't quote me or hold me to it, we'll have an open house next year, and we'll have airplanes in there doing that.